The first satisfying crack of a high-velocity round passed close enough to Chief Petty Officer Delano Vance that he felt the air split near his helmet. 7 hostiles formed a perfect circle around the ambassador's daughter in the compound courtyard below, each one using her 16-year-old body as a living shield against American precision. Vance had clear shots on exactly none of them. One stray round, one ricochet off those ancient stone walls, and Senator Franklin Ashworth's only child would die on the live video stream currently broadcasting to 14 million viewers worldwide. Vance pressed his back against the crumbling exterior wall and keyed his radio. His hands did not shake, though every instinct screamed that they should. "Overwatch," he said, "I need solutions. We're completely boxed out down here. 7 targets, 0 angles. Tell me you see something I do not." The voice that came back was calm, female, and carried the faintest trace of an accent he could not quite place. Something musical underneath the military precision. "Chief, this is call sign Prism. I have solutions on all 7. But you need to trust geometry you have never seen before." Vance had heard rumors about the woman on the other end of that radio. Whispers that circulated through the special operations community like ghost stories told around forward operating bases. A shooter who could bend bullets around corners. A sniper who saw angles that did not exist until she created them. Most operators dismissed the stories as exaggeration, the kind of legend building that happened when units needed heroes. Right now, 847 meters away, Chief Warrant Officer Inara Okonkwo lay prone in the skeletal remains of an abandoned minaret. Her rifle rested on a bipod she had positioned with millimeter precision, but her eyes were not on her scope. They were studying the walls of the compound below, the way morning light hit the northwestern corner, the steel window frames that caught sun at specific angles, the composition of the flagstones in the courtyard, worn smooth by centuries of foot traffic. Where others saw obstacles, Inara saw instruments. Every surface was a potential tool if you understood the conversation between velocity, angle, and material density. Her approach to this Overwatch position had not been clean. 3 hours earlier, she had spotted a hostile patrol moving through the rubble-strewn streets, for men with automatic weapons sweeping for exactly the kind of infiltration she represented. She had them in her crosshairs, an easy sequence of shots that would have eliminated the threat and secured her route. But huddled in the shadows of a collapsed doorway, invisible to the patrol, but perfectly visible through her scope, a Syrian child no older than 8 clutched a ragged stuffed animal and trembled. Inara had let the patrol pass. Vance, monitoring her helmet feed from his position, had questioned the decision immediately. "Prism, you had clean shots on all 4. Why did you let them walk?" Before we continue with what happened next, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Maybe you have served alongside someone whose skills seemed almost supernatural. Her answer had been simple. "The child was in my blast radius, Chief. Not the bullet path, but the aftermath. Those men would have returned fire. Stray rounds would have found that doorway. I do not take shots that cost innocent lives. That is not a limitation. That is who I am." Now, she watched the compound through her scope, her mind processing information that would have overwhelmed most observers. The 7 hostiles moved in micro-patterns, small adjustments in position that revealed their training and their fear. The one directly behind Meredith Ashworth, using the girl as primary cover, shifted his weight from left foot to right every 4 seconds. Nervous habit. Predictable. Viktor Zelenko's voice crackled over the intercepted radio frequency, his Russian accent thick with contempt. He was broadcasting to his audience, narrating what he clearly believed would be America's most humiliating failure. "You see how they hesitate," Zelenko announced. "The mighty American Special Forces, paralyzed by their own rules of engagement. They cannot shoot without risking their precious asset. They cannot advance without walking into our kill zones. This is what I call architecture. I have designed this moment specifically to be impossible." Inara listened to his arrogance and felt something cold settle into her chest. Not anger, something more useful. Certainty. She keyed her radio. "Chief Vance, I need you to do something that goes against every instinct you have developed in your years as an operator. Vance's response was tight, with controlled frustration. I am listening, Prism. I need you to trust physics. The shots I am about to describe will sound impossible. They will violate everything you understand about ballistics and engagement protocols. But I have calculated 7 solutions that will neutralize all 7 hostiles in under 45 seconds without touching a single hair on that girl's head. Silence on the channel. Then Vance spoke again, his voice carrying the weight of a man being asked to bet lives on mathematics he could not verify. Tell me what you see that I do not. Inara smiled slightly, though no one could see it. I see a conversation, Chief, between my bullets and those walls. Between velocity and angle. Between what everyone believes is impossible and what physics actually allows. I see 7 shots that will change everything. She paused, watching Zelenko gesture dramatically for his cameras, supremely confident in his architecture of death. The question is whether you are ready to let me speak. 18 months before she lay in that crumbling minaret calculating impossible angles, Inara Okonkwo stood in a concrete training facility at Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, California, surrounded by men who believed she did not belong. The evaluation range had been designed to test the limits of precision shooting. Steel targets positioned behind barriers, around corners, inside structures that simulated the chaos of urban combat. Every sniper in the special operations community who wanted advancement eventually faced this range. Most passed. Some excelled. None had ever achieved a perfect score. Inara was not there to achieve a perfect score. She was there to demonstrate something that most of her evaluators believed was impossible. A decorated SEAL sniper named Kendrick Moss stood with his arms crossed, watching her examine the course layout. He had 17 confirmed kills across 4 deployments and a reputation for saying exactly what he thought regardless of rank or consequence. Real combat is not a trick shot competition, Warrant Officer, he said loud enough for everyone present to hear. We are not circus performers. We are precision instruments of national defense. Inara did not respond. She was too busy studying the angles. A steel beam that ran along the ceiling at approximately 31 degrees. A concrete barrier with a chipped corner that created a slight concave surface. A drainage grate made of iron that would react differently to impact than the aluminum fixtures surrounding it. The course administrator explained the scenario. A high-value target position behind complete cover. No direct line of fire from any position on the range. Every other candidate had either declared the scenario unsolvable or attempted creative positioning that ultimately failed. You have 15 minutes, the administrator said. Unlimited ammunition. Begin when ready. Moss smirked. This ought to be entertaining. Inara did not move to a shooting position. Instead, she walked the range slowly, her eyes tracking invisible trajectories through the air. She paused at certain points, crouched to examine surfaces, even pressed her palm against the steel beam to feel its density and temperature. 40 minutes passed. The evaluators grew restless. Moss checked his watch repeatedly, his smirk hardening into irritation. Finally, Inara returned to the firing line. She loaded a single round, settled into her stance, and became perfectly still. Her breathing slowed until her chest barely moved. The moment between heartbeats stretched into something that felt almost sacred. She fired once. The round struck the steel beam at a precise angle, deflected downward, caught the chipped concrete corner, redirected again, and struck the target behind complete cover directly in the center of the silhouette's head. The range fell silent. Master Chief Samuel Albrecht, her instructor, and one of the few people who understood what she could do, stepped forward. His voice was quiet, but carried across the stunned facility. How did you calculate that, Warrant Officer? Inara ejected the spent casing and safed her weapon before answering. Light bends, Master Chief. So do bullets. You just have to understand the conversation between velocity, angle, and material composition. Every surface has properties. Every projectile has behaviors. Match them correctly, and geometry becomes your ally instead of your obstacle. Moss said nothing. His arms had uncrossed. His expression had shifted from contempt to something he clearly did not want to feel. Something that looked almost like respect fighting against pride. But that shot, remarkable as it was, did not define Inara Okonkwo. What defined her was a different shot entirely. One she chose not to take. 2 years before Coronado, in a location that appeared on no official map, Inara had a high-value target in a solution. A terrorist leader responsible for 3 attacks that killed dozens of civilians, including 11 children at a school in Kenya. She had calculated a deflection shot that would end him. The angle was complex but achievable. Her confidence was absolute, but there was a variable she could not eliminate. A 3% chance that bullet fragmentation after the first deflection would send shrapnel into a civilian residence 40 meters from the target's position. 3%. 97% certainty of a clean kill with no collateral damage. She did not take the shot. The target escaped. For months later, he orchestrated an ambush that killed 2 members of her support team. Men she had trained with. Men who had trusted her. The official review cleared her of any wrongdoing. The 3% risk had been within acceptable parameters for abort. No one blamed her for the decision. No one except Inara herself. She carried their names like stones in her chest. Petty Officer Vincent Karras. Petty Officer Second Class Andre Mitchell. Good men who died because she could not accept a 3% chance of harming someone innocent. That weight was with her now, in the minaret, as she prepared to take 7 shots that would either prove her methods or confirm every doubt anyone had ever expressed about her judgment. Chief Vance's voice came through her earpiece again, pulling her back to the present. Prism, Command is asking for specifics. Walk me through what you are proposing. Inara steadied her breathing and began. Shot 1. The hostile using the asset as primary cover. He shifts his weight on a 4-second cycle. At the peak of his rightward shift, a round placed on the northwest wall at 31.7 degrees will deflect off the original Ottoman-era stonework and enter his occipital region. His body falls away from the asset, not toward her. The angle guarantees it. Vance processed this. And the other 6? Each one has a solution, Chief. Different angles, different surfaces, different timing. But they all share one thing in common. They are all impossible by conventional doctrine, and they will all work. Below them, Viktor Zelenko continued his broadcast, unaware that the geometry of his perfect architecture was about to be rewritten by a woman who spoke the language of angles and understood that walls were not obstacles. They were instruments waiting to be played. 847 meters below Inara's position, Chief Petty Officer Delano Vance faced a decision that would define or destroy his career. He had spent 14 years in the SEAL teams, earned his trident through blood and discipline, led men through firefights in 6 countries. None of that experience had prepared him to stake everything on physics he could not verify. His team held positions around the compound perimeter. 4 operators, each one capable of extraordinary violence, each one completely useless against Zelenko's architecture. The hostiles had positioned themselves with precision that spoke to professional training. No gaps, no angles, no mistakes. Lieutenant Commander Hayes Thornton's voice cut through on the command channel from the Tactical Operations Center 12 kilometers away. Vance, I have Washington on the line. Senator Ashworth is watching the feed. He wants to know why his daughter is still surrounded by men with guns. Vance kept his voice controlled. Sir, we have a potential solution, but it requires authorization for an unconventional approach. Define unconventional. Our attached sniper asset believes she can neutralize all 7 hostiles using deflection shots. Ricochets off compound surfaces. She claims she can do it without any risk to the package. The silence that followed lasted long enough for Vance to hear his own heartbeat. Thornton finally responded. Deflection shots. You mean bouncing bullets off walls? That is correct, sir. Vance, I have been in special operations for 22 years. I have never heard of anyone successfully executing a combat deflection shot, let alone 7 of them in sequence. Neither have I, sir, but I have also never seen anyone calculate angles the way this woman does. And right now, She is the only option we have that does not involve acceptable losses. The phrase hung in the air. Acceptable losses. The clinical terminology for a 16-year-old girl dying on camera because conventional tactics could not reach her. In the Tactical Operations Center, Thornton turned to face the video screen where Senator Franklin Ashworth watched with hollow eyes. The senator's suit was rumpled, his tie loosened, his face carrying the particular devastation of a parent confronting their worst nightmare in real time. Were they saying, Thornton demanded, "What is this about bouncing bullets?" Thornton chose his words carefully. "Senator, we have a specialist with an unconventional skill set. She believes she can engage the hostiles without risking her daughter. But the technique is unorthodox. It has never been attempted in a live combat scenario." Ashworth's voice cracked. "My daughter is 16 years old. She was supposed to be visiting an embassy, meeting diplomats, learning about public service. Now she's on camera with guns pointed at her head while millions of people watch. I do not care about orthodox. I care about Meredith coming home." Back at the compound, Vance waited for authorization while Petty Officer Second Class Dmitry Volkov settled into position beside him. Volkov was the team's designated sniper, a methodical shooter with 11 confirmed kills and a reputation for patience that bordered on supernatural. He had reviewed Inara's proposed solutions through his own scope and found them incomprehensible. "I have studied ballistics for 9 years," Volkov said quietly. "What she is describing violates fundamental principles of trajectory prediction. Bullets do not bounce cleanly. They fragment, they destabilize, they lose velocity in unpredictable ways. What she is proposing is not difficult. It is impossible." Vance watched the compound through his binoculars. And yet she made that training shot at Coronado. The one everyone said could not be done. One shot in a controlled environment is not 7 shots in combat conditions with a living hostage in the middle. "I know, but tell me something, Dmitry. Do you have a better option?" Volkov did not answer. He did not have one. None of them did. Zelenko's voice crackled over the intercepted frequency again, his tone shifting from theatrical arrogance to something colder. "My patience has limits," he announced. "The American government believes it can wait me out, negotiate, stall until they find an angle of approach. But I designed this scenario specifically to have no angles. Every position is covered. Every approach is fatal. Your daughter, Senator Ashworth, is standing in the center of a geometric impossibility." He paused for effect. "And because your government refuses to meet my demands, I am accelerating our timeline. The first execution will occur in 40 minutes. Not your daughter. Not yet. First, we will demonstrate our seriousness with one of the embassy staff members we collected along with her." In the Tactical Operations Center, Senator Ashworth made a sound that was not quite a word. Thornton gripped the edge of the console until his knuckles went white. On the compound perimeter, Vance heard the announcement and felt the timeline collapse around him. 40 minutes. Not enough time for reinforcements, alternative approaches, or negotiated solutions. Not enough time for anything except the impossible. He keyed his radio. "Prism, you heard that." "I heard it, Chief. Can you do what you say you can do?" Inara's response came without hesitation. "I have calculated every variable. Wind speed, temperature, material composition, projectile behavior. I know exactly where each bullet will go and exactly what it will do when it gets there. 7 shots, 7 kills, 0 damage to the asset. And if you are wrong, then I will spend the rest of my life knowing I was wrong. But I'm not wrong, Chief. I'm never wrong about angles." Vance closed his eyes for one moment. When he opened them, his decision was made. "Thornton," he said into the command channel, "request authorization for Prism to engage. We are out of conventional options and out of time." The response came faster than expected. "Authorization granted. God help us all if she misses." Inara began her final preparations with the ritualistic precision of a surgeon before an operation. She adjusted her bipod by fractions of millimeters, checked her scope calibration for the 4th time, and verified the wind readings from the small sensor she had placed on the minaret's crumbling edge. Every variable mattered. Every detail could mean the difference between 7 clean kills and a dead child. Her rifle was a modified M110 semi-automatic sniper system, but the modifications were extensive enough that the original designers would barely recognize their creation. Custom barrel rifling optimized for consistent deflection behavior. Hand-loaded ammunition with precisely measured powder charges that produced identical velocities shot after shot. A scope with custom reticle markings that only made sense if you understood the mathematics of angular ballistics. She had built this weapon herself over the course of 3 years, testing each component against her theoretical models until reality matched calculation. Vance's voice came through her earpiece. "Prism, we are moving to breach positions. Talk me through the sequence one more time so my team knows what to expect." Inara settled her cheek against the stock and began walking him through the geometry of death she had constructed. Shot 1 takes the primary shield hostile. Northwestern wall deflection, 31.7 degrees. He falls backward and right, away from the asset. Your team will see the opening on the compound's eastern approach. Copy. Continue. Shot 2 uses the steel window frame on the second story. The hostile near the fountain has positioned himself against the decorative stonework, but the frame creates a ricochet path to his left temple. Shot 3 goes through the support pillar's corner. Partial penetration, redirect, and the hostile by the doorway drops. Vance listened while positioning his men. Each shot description sounded more impossible than the last, yet Inara delivered them with the casual confidence of someone reading a grocery list. Inside the compound, Viktor Zelenko conducted his own preparations with theatrical precision. He had selected the first execution victim, a young embassy translator named David O'Yellerin, who had been in the wrong convoy at the wrong time. The young man knelt in the courtyard, hands bound, breathing in sharp, terrified gasps while cameras captured every moment. Zelenko circled him slowly, speaking to his global audience. "This man is not important," he announced. "He's a translator. He speaks languages. But today he serves a higher purpose. Today he becomes a message, a demonstration that American power has limits, that American reach can be contained by superior planning." He paused beside Meredith Ashworth, who stood frozen among the armed men surrounding her. Her eyes were fixed on the kneeling translator, her face pale with horror. Zelenko stroked her hair with mock gentleness, a paternal gesture made obscene by the circumstances. "Your father could have prevented this," he told her softly. "All he had to do was convince his government to pay what we asked. Instead, he chose politics over your life. Remember that when you watch what happens next." In the Tactical Operations Center, Senator Ashworth lunged toward the screen as if he could reach through it. Thornton had to physically restrain him while aides looked away from the father's anguish. 847 meters away, Inara watched the scene through her scope and felt the familiar cold settle deeper into her bones. She had seen cruelty before. She had witnessed the particular evil that humans could inflict on each other when they believed no one could stop them. But Zelenko was something different. His cruelty was architectural, designed. He had built this moment the way an engineer builds a bridge, with careful attention to load-bearing structures and stress points. She keyed her radio to a private channel with Vance. "Chief, I need to ask you something." "Go ahead. Why did you agree to trust me? You do not know me. You have never seen me shoot outside of training reports. Everything about this goes against standard doctrine." Vance considered the question while checking his weapon for the 10th time. "When I was a young operator," he said finally, "I served under a Master Chief who told me something I never forgot. He said the best warriors are not the ones who follow doctrine blindly. They are the ones who understand when doctrine is not enough and have the courage to try something else. You're something else, Prism. I do not understand what you do, but I understand that you believe in it completely. Sometimes that has to be enough." Inara absorbed his words. "My father was a soldier," she said. "Nigerian army. He taught me to shoot before I could ride a bicycle. But more than that, he taught me that every bullet carries a choice. Most shooters think the bullet is the end of the decision. I think it is the beginning. What happens after the trigger pull is where responsibility lives." Sounds like a wise man. He was. He died when I was 16. Border conflict that never made international news. But before he died, he told me something that I carry with me into every engagement. He said that a warrior who cannot choose when not to kill is just a weapon. Weapons are used. Warriors serve. Vance was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke with a weight that surprised her. Then serve now, Prism. Serve that girl down there who did nothing wrong except have a father in politics. Serve the translator who is about to die if we do not move. Serve everyone watching around the world who needs to believe that monsters like Zelenko cannot win just because they are clever. Inara felt her father's prayer beads press against her chest beneath her tactical vest. She had carried them through every deployment, every mission, every impossible shot. They were warm from her body heat, smooth from years of contact. 23 minutes until first execution, Vance said. How much time do you need? Inara smiled grimly. Give me 15 minutes to run final calculations. Then we end this. She returned her eye to the scope and began the conversation with geometry that only she could hear. The execution happened faster than anyone expected. Zelenko had announced 40 minutes. He gave him 23. The discrepancy was deliberate, designed to catch the Americans mid-preparation, to demonstrate that he controlled the timeline and they were merely reacting to his decisions. Inara had her scope trained on the courtyard when Zelenko raised his pistol to the back of David O'Yellerin's head. She saw the young translator's shoulders shaking with sobs he could not control. She saw Meredith Ashworth turn her face away, unable to watch. She saw the hostile using Meredith as primary cover shift his weight in that predictable 4-second pattern. She had a shot on the executioner. Direct line, no deflection required. 847 meters was well within her effective range. She could put a round through Zelenko's skull before his finger completed the trigger pull, but his body would fall forward. Momentum and muscle spasm would drive the pistol toward David's head. The translator would die anyway, killed by a dead man's reflexive grip. There was no angle, no deflection, no geometry that could save David O'Yellerin without risking Meredith Ashworth. Inara's hands began to tremble. The sensation was foreign, almost unrecognizable. She had not trembled during her first combat deployment. She had not trembled when insurgents overran her position in Afghanistan, and she had killed 9 men in 11 seconds. She had not trembled during the impossible shot at Coronado that made her reputation. But she trembled now, because she was watching a man die, and her gift showed her no path to prevent it. Chief Vance's voice was urgent in her ear. Prism, do you have a solution on the executioner? Negative. No viable angle without risk to the asset. Can you take him before he fires? The mathematics spilled through her mind like water through a broken dam. Bullet travel time at 847 meters. Human reaction time to gunshot sound. Zelenko's finger position on the trigger. Probability of spasm discharge. Negative, she said, and the word tasted like ash. If I shoot him, his weapon discharges. David dies anyway, and the other hostiles react before I can acquire secondary targets. Meredith becomes a confirmed kill instead of a bargaining chip. Below, Zelenko completed his theatrical pause and pulled the trigger. The sound reached Inara's position almost a full second after the visual. She watched David O'Yellerin's body crumple forward through her scope, watched the dark spray against the ancient stones, watched Meredith Ashworth scream without hearing the sound. In the Tactical Operations Center, Senator Ashworth collapsed into a chair while staff members scrambled around him. Thornton gripped the console and forced himself to watch the feed, to bear witness to the cost of their failure to act faster. On the compound perimeter, Vance closed his eyes for 3 heartbeats. When he opened them, his voice was steady despite the fury beneath it. Prism, status report. Inara did not respond immediately. She was lost in a memory she had spent 2 years trying to bury. Vincent Karras and Andre Mitchell, the teammates who died because she would not accept a 3% risk. Now David O'Yellerin, dead because no acceptable risk existed at all. Her father's voice echoed from somewhere deep in her past. A warrior who cannot choose when not to kill is just a weapon. But what about a warrior who cannot choose to save? What did that make her? Prism, Vance repeated. I need you to respond. She forced her breathing to slow, forced her hands to steady, forced herself to look at the courtyard where Meredith Ashworth stood, surrounded by killers who would murder her next if nothing changed. I am here, Chief. Can you still execute the mission? The question cut through her spiral of guilt with surgical precision. She could mourn David O'Yelleran later. She could add his name to the weight she carried for the rest of her life. But right now, a 16-year-old girl was still alive, and Inara was still the only person who could keep her that way. She returned her eye to the scope and studied the geometry that remained. 7 hostiles, 7 angles, 43 seconds of shooting that would either prove everything she believed or destroy it completely. Affirmative, she said. I can still execute. But Chief, I need you to understand something. Go ahead. I cannot save him. I saw every angle, calculated every trajectory, and there was no path that led to David O'Yelleran surviving. That is the burden of what I do. I see possibilities that others cannot see, but I also see the impossibilities. I know exactly what I cannot do, and I have to live with that knowledge. Vance's response surprised her. Then live with it, Prism. Live with it by saving the one you can still save. That is what warriors do. We carry our failures, and we keep fighting anyway. Volkov's voice cut in on the channel, his earlier skepticism replaced by something harder. Prism, I watched you let that patrol pass to protect a child you did not know. I questioned your judgment then. I'm not questioning it now. Do what you do. We will be ready to move when you create the opening. Inara felt something shift in her chest. Not relief, not absolution, but perhaps the beginning of acceptance. She settled her breathing into the rhythm that preceded every shot, felt her heartbeat slow to the pace that allowed precision between pulses. Let the mathematics return, clean and cold and absolute. Zelenko was speaking again, promising more executions, more demonstrations of American helplessness. He believed his architecture was unbreakable. He was about to learn otherwise. Inara walked Vance through the complete solution one final time, and with each shot she described, the scope of what she was attempting became clearer to everyone listening on the command channel. Shot 1, she began. Primary shield hostile. Northwestern wall deflection at 31.7 degrees. The stone, there is original Ottoman construction, dense limestone with predictable ricochet behavior. Round enters his occipital region. He drops backward and right. Time from trigger pull to impact, approximately 1.3 seconds, including deflection. Vance visualized the trajectory and felt his understanding of ballistics reshape itself. Continue. Shot 2. Steel window frame on the second story. The hostile near the fountain believes he is protected by the decorative stonework to his left. He is wrong. The frame creates a ricochet path that curves around his cover. Left temple entry. He drops before he understands what happened. Shot 3. Support pillar corner. Partial penetration through the eroded edge. Redirect at 19 degrees, and the hostile covering the eastern doorway takes the round through his throat. This one is time-sensitive. I need him to be mid-breath for the angle to work, so I will wait for his chest expansion. Thornton's voice cut in from the Tactical Operations Center. Prism, this is Commander Thornton. I have been listening to your shot descriptions. I need to understand something. You're calculating bullet behavior after impact with multiple surfaces. How is that possible? Ballistics become chaotic after first contact with any obstacle. Inara considered how to explain something she had spent her entire adult life developing. Commander, most shooters treat deflection as random. They are wrong. Deflection follows predictable physics if you understand the variables. Surface composition, angle of incidence, bullet construction, velocity at impact. I have spent 15 years studying these interactions. I have fired over 40,000 rounds in controlled deflection experiments. The behavior is not random. It is a language. I learned to speak it. Silence on the channel. Then Thornton spoke again. Continue with shots 4 through 7. Shot 4 is the most technically challenging of the first sequence. Ground skip off the flagstone. The hostile crouching near the eastern wall has positioned himself below direct fire angles. Conventional sniping cannot reach him. But the flagstones are polished smooth by centuries of foot traffic. A round placed at the correct angle will skip off the surface and enter from below. Groin shot, fatal bleed within seconds. Vance grimaced at the description, but said nothing. Shot 5 requires a double deflection. 2 surfaces, 1 bullet. Final trajectory into the hostile guarding the northern passage. This one I have rehearsed in simulation over 300 times. Success rate in controlled conditions is 94%. And shot 6? Shot 6 is direct fire through a gap. When the primary shield hostile falls from shot 1, a momentary opening appears. Approximately 0.3 seconds duration. The hostile using Meredith as secondary cover will be exposed during that window. I place the round through the gap before it closes. Shoulder entry, severed subclavian artery. He drops his weapon and bleeds out in under 30 seconds. 6 shots. 6 hostiles. Vance did the math. You said 7 targets. Inara paused. Shot 7 is different. Different how? The 7th hostile is Viktor Zelenko's compound commander. He positions himself inside the doorway of the main structure, completely shielded by stone walls on 3 sides. There is no direct angle. There is no single deflection angle. There is no double deflection angle. Then how do you take him? Triple surface deflection. Metal drainage cover to decorative stone arch to wrought iron gate to target. 3 redirects, 1 bullet. Final velocity approximately 400 meters per second. Enough to penetrate, but not exit. The round enters through his left eye socket. The channel went silent. Even Thornton, who had authorized dozens of unconventional operations in his career, seemed unable to respond. Finally, Vance spoke. Has anyone ever successfully executed a triple surface deflection shot? No, Inara admitted. The mathematics exist. The physics are sound, but no one has ever attempted it in live conditions. So shot 7 is theoretical. Shot 7 is calculated. Every variable is accounted for. Surface compositions verified through optical analysis. Angles measured to within 0.05 degrees. Velocity degradation modeled across all 3 impacts. The shot works. I know it works. I have run the numbers over 400 times. Volkov's voice carried an edge of disbelief. You are betting a 16-year-old girl's life on a shot that has never been taken. Inara's response was immediate. I am betting her life on physics. Physics does not lie, petty officer. Physics does not have opinions or doubts. Physics simply is. And physics says that a bullet traveling at the velocity I will achieve, striking the surfaces at the angles I have calculated, will terminate in Viktor Zelenko's compound commander. Every time, without exception, another silence stretched across the channel. Then new information arrived that changed everything. Commander, a voice from the intelligence section interrupted. We have complete analysis on Zelenko's network connections. This operation is not isolated. He is connected to a consortium of hostile actors across 3 continents. This kidnapping is a proof of concept. If his architecture succeeds, if he proves that American special operations can be neutralized through geometric positioning, the model will be replicated globally. Every embassy, every diplomatic convoy, every high-value American becomes a potential target. Thornton absorbed the implications. So this is not just about Senator Ashworth's daughter. No, sir. This is about whether the United States can rescue its people when hostile actors design scenarios specifically to prevent rescue. If PRISM succeeds, she proves no architecture is unbreakable. If she fails, we have just shown every terrorist organization in the world exactly how to beat us. The weight of those words settled over the channel like a physical presence. Inara spoke into the silence. Then I will not fail. The minutes before combat carried a specific quality that veterans recognized but could never quite describe to those who had not experienced it. Time moved differently. Sound became sharper. Colors seemed to intensify as if the world itself understood that everything was about to change. Inara felt that quality now as she made her final preparations. Her breathing had settled into the shallow rhythm that preceded precision shooting. Her heartbeat had slowed to 52 beats per minute, a pace she had trained herself to maintain through years of deliberate practice. Her hands, steady once more, made microscopic adjustments to her rifle's position. Vance's team had reached their breach positions around the compound perimeter. For operators pressed against ancient walls, weapons ready, waiting for the impossible to happen. Volkov had positioned himself 300 meters from Inara's location, providing secondary overwatch. His role was to engage any targets she missed, though they both understood that if she missed, the mission would already be lost. His presence was less tactical necessity than professional solidarity. One sniper watching another attempt something that had never been done. He keyed his radio to a private channel. "Prism, I want to say something before this begins." Inara kept her eye on the scope, but opened the channel. "Go ahead. I have been shooting for 9 years. I have made shots that other people said were impossible. But what you are about to attempt makes everything I have done look like target practice. I want you to know that regardless of what happens in the next few minutes, I understand now. I understand what you are. And what am I? You're not a sniper. You're something else. Something that does not have a name yet. When they write the manuals about what you did today, they will have to invent new terminology." Inara allowed herself a small smile. "My father would have called it seeing with borrowed light. Using what the world gives you to illuminate what others cannot see. Then see clearly, Prism. See clearly and shoot true." She returned her full attention to the compound. Through her scope, she watched Zelenko pace the courtyard, still performing for his cameras, still confident in his unbreakable architecture. Meredith Ashworth stood motionless among the hostiles, her face blank with shock. The girl had stopped crying. She had stopped reacting entirely. Her mind had retreated somewhere safer than the courtyard where her life hung, suspended between mathematics and murder. Inara studied the 7 men she was about to kill. Each one had a family somewhere. Each one had made choices that led them to this courtyard, to this moment, to the crosshairs of a woman they would never see. She did not hate them. Hatred was a luxury that interfered with precision. She simply understood them as variables in an equation that had only one acceptable solution. Her father's prayer beads pressed against her chest. She could feel each worn bead through her tactical vest, smooth from decades of contact with faithful hands. First her father's hands during morning prayers in Lagos, then her own hands during the sleepless nights that followed difficult missions. She whispered the words he had taught her, words in Yoruba that had no direct English translation, words that asked not for success, but for the strength to accept whatever outcome the universe provided. Words that reminded her she was not merely a weapon, but a human being making choices in impossible circumstances. A voice interrupted her meditation. "Prism, this is Commander Thornton. I have new information from Washington." "Go ahead, Commander." "Senator Ashworth has made direct contact with the Secretary of Defense. He is demanding we proceed with a conventional assault regardless of risk to his daughter. He says he cannot watch another execution. He is authorizing acceptable losses." Inara processed this information without emotion. The senator's desperation was understandable. His daughter was surrounded by killers, and he had just watched a young man die in her place. Desperation made people accept outcomes they would never consider under normal circumstances. "What is your response, Commander?" Thornton's voice carried a weight that suggested he had aged years in the past hour. "I told the Secretary that we have an unconventional solution in progress. I told him that our specialist has calculated a path to 0 collateral damage. I told him that we need 15 more minutes." And the Secretary's response? "You have 10. After that, conventional assault is authorized with all associated risks. 10 minutes. 600 seconds. Time enough to change everything or lose everything." "Understood, Commander. 10 minutes is sufficient." She returned her eye to the scope and began the final sequence of calculations. Wind speed had remained constant. Temperature had dropped by 2 degrees, which would slightly increase air density and affect bullet drop at this distance. She adjusted her mental models accordingly. The first shot would determine everything. If the northwestern wall deflected her round at the precise angle she had calculated, the remaining shots would fall into place like dominoes. If the deflection varied by even half a degree, Meredith Ashworth would die, and every terrorist watching the live stream would learn that American rescue capabilities had limits. Vance's voice came through one final time. Prism, all teams in position. We are ready to breach on your signal. The moment you take shot one, we are committed. There is no abort after that. Understood, Chief. Prepare for breach on first shot. She settled her breathing, felt her heartbeat slow even further. Let the world narrow to the small circle of light visible through her scope. In that circle, 7 men held a girl's life in their hands. In 43 seconds, she would take it back. Ready, she said, initiating engagement sequence. The wind shifted. Inara felt it before her sensors registered the change. A subtle variation in the air currents flowing through the minaret's broken windows, carrying the smell of dust and distant fires. Her body recognized a shift through 15 years of reading environmental conditions, through countless hours of lying prone in exposed positions while the world moved around her. She checked her wind sensor. The gentle breeze she had calculated for had intensified. Not by much, perhaps 2 knots, a variation that most shooters would dismiss as insignificant. But Inara was not most shooters. And at 847 meters with deflection shots that depended on millimeter precision, 2 knots changed everything. Her carefully constructed mathematics began to crumble. Shot 1 would still work. The northwestern wall deflection had enough margin to accommodate the wind shift. But shot 4, the ground skip off the flagstones, now carried unacceptable uncertainty. Shot 5, the double deflection, would miss entirely. And shot 7, the unprecedented triple surface calculation, had become genuinely impossible under the new conditions. Vance's voice came through her earpiece. Prism, we are holding at breach positions, waiting on your signal. She did not respond immediately. Her mind was racing through recalculations, trying to find new angles that accommodated the changed variables. Every second that passed was a second closer to Washington's deadline, a second closer to the conventional assault that would almost certainly kill Meredith Ashworth. Prism, respond. What is your status? Stand by, she managed. Conditions have changed. Recalculating. In the Tactical Operations Center, Thornton leaned forward. Change how? Wind shift. 2 knots increase. My original solutions are no longer viable. The channel erupted with overlapping voices. Thornton demanding clarification. Intelligence officers reporting that Zelenko appeared to be preparing another announcement. Senator Ashworth's panicked questions in the background. Vance cut through the chaos with command authority. Everyone quiet. Prism, talk to me. Can you adapt? Inara closed her eyes. She had 90 seconds, maybe less, to recalculate 7 shots that had taken her hours to originally compute. Her notebook was useless now. The diagram she had drawn, the angles she had measured, all of it belonged to a world with different wind conditions. She would have to do this in her head. Pure mathematics, pure instinct, pure faith in 15 years of training. When she opened her eyes, something had shifted inside her. The panic that had begun to rise was gone, replaced by a clarity she had experienced only a handful of times in her life. Her father had described it once, in the quiet hours before dawn, when he taught her to shoot on the outskirts of Lagos. He called it the moment when the warrior stops thinking and starts knowing. She stopped thinking. She started knowing. New solutions began to form in her mind. Not calculated, recognized, as if they had always existed and she was simply seeing them for the first time. The wind shift that had seemed catastrophic now revealed new possibilities. Different surfaces caught the changed air currents in ways that created angles she had not previously considered. Shot 1 remained unchanged. Northwestern wall, 31.7 degrees. But shot 2 now used a different section of the steel window frame, accounting for the wind's effect on her bullet's flight path. Shot 3 found a new corner of the support pillar. Shot 4 abandoned the flagstone skip entirely in favor of a low-angle deflection off a metal drainage grate she had previously dismissed. Shot 5. Shot 6. Each one reformed in her mind like water, finding new channels through stone. And Shot 7. The impossible shot. The triple surface deflection that had never been attempted. She saw it now. Not the path she had originally calculated, but a new path. The wind shift had changed the trajectory requirements, but it had also changed the deflection angles off each surface. Metal drainage cover at a steeper approach. Decorative stone arch with adjusted contact point. Wrought iron gate at a fraction of a degree different from her original calculation. The mathematics were different. The result was the same. New solutions confirmed, she said, and her voice carried a certainty that silenced everyone on the channel. All shots recalculated, accounting for current wind conditions. Ready on your mark. Vance exhaled slowly. How confident are you? Inara considered the question. Confidence was a luxury she could not afford. Doubt was a poison she could not tolerate. What remained was something simpler and more powerful than either. I do not deal in confidence, Chief. I deal in geometry. And geometry does not lie. She settled her cheek against the stock of her rifle, felt the familiar weight and balance of the weapon she had built with her own hands. Let her breathing slow until the space between heartbeats stretched into something approaching eternity. In a compound below, Zelenko raised his hand to signal his men. Whatever he was planning, it would not matter in 43 seconds. Prism is in position, Inara said. Final solutions confirmed. 7 targets. 7 angles. Awaiting execute command. Thornton's voice came through, heavy with the weight of authorization. All elements. This is Commander Thornton. Execute, execute, execute. Inara squeezed the trigger at the exact moment between heartbeats, and the world changed forever. Shot 1 crossed 847 meters in less than a second. Inara watched through her scope as the round struck the northwestern wall at precisely the angle she had calculated, deflected off centuries-old Ottoman limestone, and entered the primary shield hostile through the back of his skull. His body fell exactly as physics demanded, backward and to the right, away from Meredith Ashworth, clearing the space that had protected him for hours. The girl flinched at the sudden movement, but did not understand what had happened. None of them understood yet. Inara was already on shot 2. The steel window frame caught her second round and redirected it with mechanical precision. The hostile near the fountain had positioned himself against decorative stonework, confident in his cover. He was still confident when the bullet entered his left temple from an angle he had not known existed. He dropped without a sound, his weapon clattering against the flagstones. 2 down, 5 remaining. Elapsed time for seconds. Shot 3 required patience. The hostile by the eastern doorway was mid-breath, his chest expanding in the rhythm Inara had memorized through hours of observation. She waited for the peak of his inhalation, the moment when his body position created the precise angle she needed through the eroded support pillar corner. She fired. The round penetrated the pillar's edge, redirected at 19 degrees, and took him through the throat. He clutched at the wound with both hands and collapsed against the doorframe. In the courtyard, chaos was beginning to bloom. The remaining hostiles had heard the impacts, seen their comrades fall, but could not identify the source. They scanned the rooftops, the windows, the angles they understood. None of them thought to look at the walls themselves, at the surfaces that had become instruments of their destruction. Shot 4. The drainage grate she had identified during her wind shift recalculation gleamed dully in the courtyard's filtered light. The hostile crouching near the eastern wall believed his low position made him invulnerable to sniper fire. He was wrong. Inara's round struck the metal grate at a shallow angle and skipped upward like a stone across water. The trajectory carried it into the hostile from below, a direction no conventional shooter would ever attempt. He screamed once and fell. For down. 3 remaining. Elapsed time, 19 seconds. Zelenko was shouting orders now, his theatrical composure finally cracking. He grabbed Meredith Ashworth and pulled her closer, using her body as absolute cover while his remaining men scrambled for positions that did not exist. Shot 5. Double deflection. 2 surfaces, 1 bullet. A geometry problem that Inara had solved 300 times in simulation and was now solving once in reality. The round bounced off the first surface, a decorative metal fixture that Zelenko's architect had installed for aesthetic purposes. It redirected toward the second surface, a stone column worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. The final trajectory carried it into the hostile guarding the northern passage. He fell backward, his weapon discharging harmlessly into the sky. 5 down, 2 remaining. Elapsed time, 31 seconds. One of the surviving hostiles panicked. He abandoned his position and rushed toward Meredith, intent on using her as complete cover. His movement was exactly what Inara had anticipated, exactly what she needed. Shot 6. The gap created by the first hostile's fall remained open for precisely the duration she had calculated. 0.3 seconds of exposure, a window that existed only because she had engineered it with her first shot. She placed her round through that window with the precision of a surgeon threading a needle. The hostile's shoulder exploded in a spray of red, his subclavian artery severed by a bullet he never saw coming. He released Meredith and collapsed, his life draining onto the ancient stones. 6 down, 1 remaining. Elapsed time, 38 seconds. The compound commander stood in the doorway of the main structure, exactly where Inara had known he would be, shielded by stone walls on 3 sides, protected by an architecture designed specifically to defeat American precision, confident in geometry that had never been challenged. Inara centered her crosshairs on the metal drainage cover that would receive her 7th shot. She had never attempted a triple surface deflection. No one had. The mathematics existed only in her calculations, validated only by her understanding of physics. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. A warrior who cannot choose when not to kill is just a weapon. Warriors serve. She chose to serve. She chose to take the shot that physics said was possible and experience said was impossible. She chose to trust 15 years of training over every instinct that screamed she was attempting the unachievable. Shot 7. The round struck the drainage cover and deflected upward toward the decorative stone arch. It kissed the arch's curved surface and redirected toward the wrought iron gate. The gate caught the bullet and sent it on its final trajectory, through the doorway, through the shadows, and into the compound commander's left eye socket. He fell without understanding what had killed him, without knowing that walls could become weapons and geometry could become justice. 7 shots, 7 down. Elapsed time, 43 seconds. Inara exhaled slowly and keyed her radio. Prism to all elements. Shots complete. All hostiles neutralized. Asset is secure. Breach when ready. Vance's response came immediately, his voice carrying something between disbelief and awe. Breach, breach, breach. All teams move now. The SEAL operators flowed into the compound like water through broken stone. But Inara remained in her position, watching through her scope as Meredith Ashworth stood alone among fallen men, alive because physics had proven more powerful than architecture. 7 angles. 7 impossibilities. 1 girl going home to her father. The SEAL team moved through the compound with the fluid precision of men who had trained for exactly this moment. Vance reached Meredith Ashworth first, covering her with his body while his teammates cleared the remaining structures. She was shaking uncontrollably, her eyes wide and unfocused, her mind struggling to process the violence that had erupted and ended in less than a minute. Blood that was not hers stained her clothing. The bodies of men who had held her captive lay scattered across the courtyard like broken dolls. "You are safe," Vance told her, his voice cutting through her shock with practiced calm. "We are United States Navy. We're taking you home." Meredith opened her mouth, but no words came. She simply nodded, tears streaming down her face, and allowed Vance to guide her toward the extraction point. In the Tactical Operations Center, Senator Franklin Ashworth watched the feed with his hand pressed against his mouth. His daughter was alive. His daughter was walking. His daughter was coming home. The reality of it seemed too large to fit inside his chest. Thornton allowed himself 3 seconds of relief before returning to operational mode. All teams report status. Alpha Team, courtyard secure. Package is mobile. Bravo Team, eastern structure clear. Charlie Team, northern passage clear. One report did not come. Volkov's voice cut through the channel with an edge of concern. Commander, we have a problem. Zelenko is not among the bodies in the courtyard. Inara heard the report through her earpiece and immediately swept her scope across the compound. 7 hostiles down, 7 bodies accounted for. But Zelenko, the architect of this nightmare, had not been among her targets. He had been using Meredith as cover when the shooting started, then vanished in the chaos. She found him 3 seconds later. He was moving through a doorway on the compound's western edge, heading toward a structure she had dismissed during her initial reconnaissance. A small building, partially collapsed, unremarkable except for the heavy cables running from its roof toward the main courtyard. Prism to all elements, she said sharply. Zelenko is moving toward the western structure. I have visual. He appears to be heading for some kind of control point. Vance responded while continuing to move Meredith toward extraction. Can you take the shot? Negative. No angle from my position. The structure blocks direct fire, and there are no deflection surfaces in that corridor. Volkov was already moving. I am repositioning. 60 seconds to new Overwatch. But 60 seconds was too long. Inara watched through her scope as Zelenko reached the structure's entrance and disappeared inside. Whatever was in that building, whatever those cables connected to, he would reach it before anyone could stop him. Vance made a tactical decision. Volkov continued a new position. I am diverting to intercept. He passed Meredith to another operator and sprinted toward the western structure, his weapon raised. Inara tracked his movement through her scope, providing what Overwatch she could despite the limited angles. Zelenko emerged from a side door just as Vance rounded the corner. The 2 men faced each other across 15 meters of rubble-strewn ground, weapons raised, neither willing to fire first. You are too late, Zelenko said, his Russian accent thick with satisfaction. My architecture failed, but my contingency succeeds. The entire courtyard is wired with explosives. One signal from the device in this building, and everyone dies. Your men, the girl, everyone. Vance kept his weapon steady. Then why have you not triggered it already? Because I want you to understand. I want America to understand. You cannot defeat planning with violence. You cannot overcome intelligence with brute force. Even now, even with your miracle sniper and your impossible angles, I still control the outcome. In the minaret, Inara processed Zelenko's words and felt cold certainty settle into her bones. He was not bluffing. The cable she had dismissed, the structure she had ignored, it all made sense now. Zelenko had designed a failsafe. If his architecture failed, he would destroy everything rather than allow American victory. She swept her scope across the compound, searching desperately for an angle. Any angle. A surface that could redirect a bullet into the western structure. A path that could reach Zelenko before he triggered his explosives. There was nothing. For the first time since she had learned to speak the language of geometry, the world offered her no solutions. Then she saw it. Not an angle on Zelenko. An angle on the detonator itself. Through a window no larger than a dinner plate, she could see the device he had been moving toward. A simple mechanism, military grade, designed to send a signal that would kill everyone in the courtyard. The shot was impossible by any conventional standard. 863 meters. A window that appeared as a tiny rectangle of darkness in her scope. A target no larger than a paperback book. And Zelenko, standing between her and the window, blocking any deflection path she might have used. But she did not need a deflection. She needed direct fire through a gap that would exist for only as long as Zelenko remained focused on Vance. Chief Vance, she said quietly. Keep him talking. Keep his attention forward. I have a solution on the detonator, not the target. Vance did not acknowledge verbally. He simply kept his weapon raised and his eyes locked on Zelenko. "Your architecture was impressive," Vance said. "Truly, I have never seen anything like it." Zelenko smiled. "Of course you have not. I spent 3 years designing the scenario. Every angle accounted for. Every approach neutralized. The government spent billions on special operations, and I defeated it with geometry." Behind him, invisible to his perception, Inara aligned her shot. The window was so small that her crosshairs nearly filled it entirely. The detonator sat on a table just inside, its trigger mechanism exposed. She fired. The round crossed 863 meters in just over a second. It passed through the window without touching the frame, crossed the interior of the structure in a fraction of a heartbeat, and struck the detonator with enough force to shatter its internal components into useless fragments. Zelenko heard the impact and spun toward the structure. His hand reached for a backup trigger that no longer had anything to connect to. "Architecture that," Vance said, and closed the distance between them. The fight between Vance and Zelenko was brutal and brief. Zelenko was a trained operative, former FSB with decades of experience in violence. But Vance was a SEAL with 14 years of close-quarters combat drilled into his muscle memory. The Russian threw the first punch, a vicious hook aimed at Vance's temple. Vance deflected it, stepped inside the arc, and delivered an elbow strike that shattered Zelenko's nose. Blood sprayed across the rubble. Zelenko staggered but did not fall. He pulled a knife from his belt, the blade glinting in the filtered light, and slashed at Vance's throat. Vance leaned back just far enough to feel the blade whisper past his skin. He caught Zelenko's wrist on the return stroke, twisted sharply, and heard the satisfying crack of bones breaking. The knife clattered to the ground. Zelenko screamed in pain and rage. "Your miracle sniper cannot save you now. This is what real combat looks like. Not angles and mathematics. Blood and bone." Vance responded by driving his knee into Zelenko's midsection, then following with a hammer fist to the back of his skull. The Russian collapsed face first into the dirt, conscious but broken. "You were right," Vance said, standing over him. "This is real combat, and you lost." He secured Zelenko's hands with zip ties and keyed his radio. "Commander Thornton, high-value target, is in custody. Requesting immediate extraction for package and prisoner." In the Tactical Operations Center, the tension that had gripped everyone for hours finally released. Staff members embraced. Intelligence officers slumped in their chairs with exhaustion. Senator Ashworth wept openly, no longer caring who saw his tears. Thornton allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before responding. "Extraction inbound. Outstanding work, all elements." Outstanding work. 847 meters away, Inara finally lowered her rifle. Her shoulders ached from hours of maintaining the same position. Her eyes burned from a strain of constant focus through her scope. Her hands, steady throughout the entire operation, now trembled slightly with the release of tension she had not allowed herself to feel. Volkov's voice came through on the private channel. "Prism, I am at your position in 3 minutes. Do not move." She did not have the energy to ask why. She simply waited, watching through her scope as the SEAL team consolidated in the courtyard below. Meredith Ashworth was wrapped in a thermal blanket now, surrounded by operators who formed a protective shield around her. She was speaking to Vance, her words inaudible at this distance, but her body language suggested the beginning of recovery. Volkov arrived exactly when he said he would. He climbed through the minaret's broken entrance and settled into a position beside Inara, his own rifle slung across his back. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They simply watched the compound together, two snipers bearing witness to the aftermath of something unprecedented. "I counted your shots," Volkov finally said. 7 triggers pulled, 7 bodies on the ground. 43 seconds from first to last. "I have been shooting since I was 19 years old. I have never seen anything like what you did today." Inara did not respond immediately. She was thinking about David O'Yelleran, the translator she could not save. His body still lay in the courtyard below, covered now by a tarp that one of the operators had placed over him. A small gesture of respect for a man who had died, because geometry offered no path to his survival. "I could not save everyone," she said quietly. "No one can save everyone, but you saved the one that mattered most. And you did it in a way that will change how our enemies think about hostage scenarios forever." Zelenko designed what he thought was an unbreakable architecture. You broke it with physics and precision. That message will spread. Is that supposed to make me feel better? Volkov considered the question. No, nothing makes it better. The weight you carry does not get lighter. But maybe it gets easier to bear when you understand that what you did today will save lives you will never know about. Terrorists who will choose different tactics because they learned that walls are not protection. Hostages who will come home because their captors remember what happened here. Inara let his words settle into the spaces where guilt and grief competed for dominance. She was not ready to accept them completely. Maybe she never would be, but she could acknowledge the possibility that he was right. "My father used to say that borrowed light is still light," she said. "Even if it does not come from you directly, it still illuminates the darkness." Volkov nodded slowly. "Then you illuminated something today, Prism. Something that will cast a long shadow over anyone who thinks they can architect their way around American resolve." Below them, helicopter rotors began to beat the air. Extraction was arriving. Meredith Ashworth would be on a military aircraft within the hour, flying toward a reunion with her father and a lifetime of therapy for what she had experienced. Zelenko would be in a different aircraft, flying toward interrogation facilities and the slow unraveling of his network. And Inara would return to Coronado, to her calculations and her training scenarios and her endless pursuit of angles that should not exist. She would add David O'Yellerin's name to the weight she carried. She would remember Meredith Ashworth's face, blank with shock, standing among fallen men. She would remember that 7 shots had changed everything, and that the impossible had become simply another problem she had solved. "We should move," Volkov said. "Extraction will want us at the rally point in 15 minutes. Inara broke down her rifle with practiced efficiency, securing each component in her pack. The weapon that had just accomplished the unprecedented would need cleaning, maintenance, recalibration. It was just a tool, after all. The real weapon was in her mind, in the mathematics that spoke to her in a language no one else could hear. "Lead the way," she said. "I am right behind you." 1 week later, Inara stood in a training facility at Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, watching the next generation of special operations candidates struggle with a scenario she had designed specifically to challenge their assumptions. The course required shooters to engage targets positioned behind obstacles that blocked all conventional angles. Most candidates spent their allotted time attempting creative positioning, trying to find lines of fire that did not exist. A few declared the scenario unsolvable and requested permission to move on. One candidate, a young petty officer named Kwame Asani, with sharp eyes and a quiet confidence that reminded Inara of herself at that age, did something different. He walked the course slowly, studying surfaces rather than sight lines. He pressed his palm against a steel beam, testing its density. He examined the angle where 2 walls met, calculating something in his head. Then he returned to the firing line and asked a question no other candidate had asked. "Warrant officer, what is the composition of that beam?" Inara allowed herself a small smile. "Carbon steel, 0.3% carbon content." "Why do you ask?" The young man considered his answer carefully. "Because if it is carbon steel at that angle, a round striking at approximately 32 degrees would deflect toward the target's position. Not a direct hit, but close enough to neutralize." Inara felt something shift in her chest. Hope, perhaps, or recognition. The same recognition Master Chief Obrecht must have felt when he first watched her calculate the impossible. "Show me," she said. Asani loaded a single round, settled into his stance, and fired. The bullet struck the beam, deflected at almost exactly the angle he had predicted, and struck the target 3 inches left of center. Not a kill shot, but proof of concept. "Your calculation was correct," Inara told him. "Your execution needs refinement." But the fact that you saw the angle at all means you understand something most shooters never learn. What is that, warrant officer? That walls are not obstacles. They are instruments. Geometry is not limitation. It is language. Learn to speak it, and you will never face an impossible shot again. Asani nodded slowly, absorbing her words with the intensity of someone who recognized a turning point in his own development. Inara made a mental note to follow his progress. The language of angles needed more speakers. After the training session, she returned to her quarters and found a letter waiting on her desk. Handwritten on expensive stationery, addressed simply to the sniper who saved my daughter. Inara opened it carefully and began to read. Dear Warrant Officer Okonkwo, the letter began. I do not know the proper protocol for thanking someone who saved your child's life. I have written and discarded this letter 7 times because no words seem adequate for what you accomplished. My daughter Meredith is home now. She sleeps with the lights on and wakes screaming from nightmares I cannot protect her from. The therapists say recovery will take years. But she is alive to recover. She is alive because you saw angles that no one else could see and took shots that no one else could take. I am told that your actions will remain classified. No medals, no public recognition, no acknowledgement of what you did. This seems profoundly unjust to me, but I understand the reasons. What I want you to know is that even if the world never learns your name, my family will never forget it. Meredith asked me to include something in this letter. She said she remembers the silence between the shots. She said that in those 43 seconds, she felt something she cannot explain. A presence, perhaps. A sense that someone was making choices specifically to keep her alive. She wanted you to know that she felt those choices. She wanted to thank you for making them. With profound gratitude, Senator Franklin Ashworth. Inara read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in the wooden box where she kept her father's prayer beads. The box was small, unremarkable, but it held everything that mattered. The beads that connected her to her past. The letter that validated her present. The geometry that would guide her future. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Chief Petty Officer Delano Vance standing in the hallway, dressed in civilian clothes, looking uncomfortable in a way that combat never made him. Chief, she said, I did not expect to see you here. I was passing through on my way to a new deployment. Vance said, I wanted to stop by and tell you something in person. She stepped aside to let him enter. He stood awkwardly in the center of her small quarters, a man more comfortable in firefights than conversations. I've been doing this job for 14 years, he said finally. I have seen courage that defies description, but I have never seen anyone carry the weight you carry. 7 shots, 0 damage to the asset. Most people would call that a miracle, but I watched you calculate those shots. I watched you recalculate when the wind shifted. I watched you make choices in fractions of seconds that would have paralyzed anyone else. Inara waited for him to continue. What you did was not a miracle, Prism. It was mastery. And I wanted you to know that if I ever face another impossible situation, another scenario where conventional doctrine offers no solutions, I know who I am calling. He extended his hand. She shook it firmly. And I will answer, she said. But Chief, you should know that I am still calculating. Still seeing angles that do not exist yet. The next impossible shot is already waiting somewhere. I just have to find it. Vance smiled. Then find it. And when you do, show the world that no architecture is unbreakable. Show them that walls are instruments and geometry is language. Show them what happens when someone learns to see with borrowed light. He left without ceremony, the way operators always did. Inara watched him go, then turned back to the window that overlooked the Pacific Ocean. If you enjoyed this story, drop a comment and let us know what resonated most with you. Have you ever known someone whose skills seemed almost supernatural? Someone who saw solutions where everyone else saw only obstacles? Share your story below. The sun was setting over Coronado, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere out there, enemies were designing new architectures, new scenarios they believed would be unbreakable. They were wrong. Inara Okonkwo saw angles they could not imagine. She spoke a language they did not know existed. And she would keep seeing, keep speaking, keep choosing the paths that led to life rather than death. Because that was what warriors did. Not weapons. Warriors. 7 shots. 43 seconds. One impossible rescue that proved nothing was truly impossible. The prism would keep bending light until every shadow was illuminated.